Good morning. Welcome to our Bible study this morning. This morning I thought we would look at two very interesting verses and try to answer a question about these verses and what they're speaking of. The first verse I would like us to look at is found in James chapter 1 and verse number 12. James 1 and verse number 12. Listen to what's said. Blessed is the man that endureth temptation, for when he is tried, he shall receive the crown of life which the Lord hath promised to them that love him. Notice what's said in this verse. It's saying that when a man endures temptation, he is being put under a trial. Notice again what it said. Blessed is the man that endureth temptation, for when he is tried. So this verse seems to imply that the very same opportunity to sin that opens up to a man what we would call temptation, this verse seems to say that that temptation is also a trial or a testing that this man is about to go through. We have another verse that says practically the same idea, or at least it carries the same principle concerning temptation and testing. In Revelation 3:10, listen to what's said. Because thou hast kept the word of my patience, I will also keep thee from the hour of temptation, which shall come upon all the earth to try them that dwell upon the earth. Once again, you can see where when the men of the earth are placed under this temptation, it is given to them to try them or to test them. What's even more interesting is this. If we study the four most common words translated temptation in the Bible, there's two in Hebrew and two in Greek that are very commonly used to be translated into the word temptation. When we study those four words, we find that in every case, all four of those words, the basic meaning behind them is to put someone to the test, to test someone, to try someone. So even in the original language, the relationship between temptation and trials or testings goes hand in hand. Okay, folks, what can we learn from all of this? What's the idea behind a temptation being described as a trial or a testing in the Bible? What I would like us to look at to begin our study this morning is, look at Daniel 4:34 through 36, please. Daniel 4:34 through 36. Here's what's said. And at the end of days I, Nebuchadnezzar, lifted up mine eyes unto heaven, and mine understanding returned unto me. And I blessed the Most High, and I praised and honored him that liveth forever, whose dominion is an everlasting dominion, and his kingdom is from generation to generation. Now listen to what's said in the next part. And all the inhabitants of the earth are reputed as nothing. He doeth according to his will in the army of heaven and among the inhabitants of the earth. None can stay his hand or say unto him, What doest thou? What I would like us to notice is this. This is King Nebuchadnezzar speaking after the Lord had turned him out into the field like an animal. If you remember, the Lord had turned him out in the field. He had taken his kingdom away from him. And it was as if he's even described as an animal out in this field, where his hair grew like feathers and his fingernails and toenails grew like bird claws, if you remember. You can read all about that in Daniel 4. After the Lord had dealt with Nebuchadnezzar and humbled him, this is the conclusion Nebuchadnezzar came to, that God truly controls all things. There's not a thing that takes place, as he says, in the heavens or on the earth, that is not a part of God's sovereign will. Folks, that would include temptation. Now, we all know that the Lord does not actually cause temptation to take place. He doesn't bring temptation on a person. James 1:13 tells us, Let no man say when he is tempted, I am tempted of God. For God cannot be tempted with either evil, neither tempteth he any man. So we can see in that verse it's clear that God doesn't actually originate the temptation. He does not actually bring the temptation upon men. But God does allow Satan. God allows the other forces of darkness. God allows this fallen earth. God even allows our sinful flesh at times to bring temptation upon us. So he allows it to take place. Why does he allow temptation to take place? He has a purpose behind it, or he wouldn't allow it. Turn with me, please, to Job 1, 6 through 12. We can see how this works more clearly in Job 1, 6 through 12. The idea of temptation and God not causing it, but God allowing it to take place. In Job 1, 6 through 12. Now there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan came also among them. And the Lord said unto Satan, Whence comest thou? Then Satan answered the Lord and said, From going to and fro in the earth, and from walking up and down in it. And the Lord said unto Satan, Hast thou considered my servant Job, that there is none like him in the earth, a perfect and an upright man, one that fears God and eschews evil? Then Satan answered the Lord and said, Doth Job fear God for naught? Hast thou not made an hedge about him, and about his house, and about all that he has on every side? Thou hast blessed the work of his hands, and his substance is increased in the land. Okay, let's stop right there for a minute. You have Satan coming up to the Lord, and he says, and the Lord says to Satan, Satan, have you ever considered my man Job? Job is the faithful on the earth. As he said, he's learned to fear me. The Lord speaking here, speaking of Job, he's learned to fear me, and he has learned to keep evil away from himself. Satan's response is, well, that's an easy thing to do for Job, and here's why. You've blessed him greatly. Look at all you've done for Job. Why wouldn't he fear you, and why wouldn't he keep evil out of his life? I mean, you've blessed him. You've given him no reason to doubt you. You've been his constant companion who has blessed him throughout his life. So watch the question that Job asked to the Lord. Hast thou not made an hedge about him and his house, and about all that he has on every side? Hast thou blessed the work of his hands, and the substance is increased in the land? So he's saying, man, Lord, no wonder he's your servant. Look at all you've done for him. He has no reason to not serve you. He has no reason to not doubt you. You have been with him all this time, blessing him. There's no reason for him to doubt. There's no reason not to serve you. So Job now makes if you want to call this a proposition to the Lord, he says, But put forth thine hand now and touch all that he hath, and he will curse thee to thy face. So Satan says, Lord, if you just reach down and touch Job, if you take away all these blessings, he'll curse you and he'll turn his back on you. The Lord said to Satan, Behold, all that he hath is in thy power. Only upon himself put not forth thine hand. The Lord, in other words, is saying, look, I'm not going to touch Job. I'm not going to cause this to come upon him, but I'll allow you to bring it upon him instead. So the Lord's not the one that reaches down and touches Job and takes away all these blessings, but he allows Satan to do it. So Satan went forth from the presence of the Lord. And then you know from the story of Job, that's exactly what Satan does. He reaches down. He touches Job's life. He takes away many of the blessings that God gave to Job. Almost all of them except his physical life. Job is allowed to retain that. The Lord puts a limit on Satan's activity in the life of Job, saying, Satan, you're not allowed to take his life. And there were many reasons why the Lord allowed this to take place. There were many reasons why the Lord allowed this testing to fall upon Job. One of the greatest was that the Lord be glorified in this whole incident by Job remaining faithful to the Lord even after he loses everything. You know, there's many reasons why this took place, and I don't have the time to get into all of it this morning, but the point I want you to see is this. This is how temptation works. The Lord doesn't bring temptation upon people, but he allows Satan to do that. You might say, well, Satan taking away what the Lord had blessed Job with, how is that a temptation? It was a temptation to Job to stop serving the Lord. It was a temptation that came upon Job that would cause him to doubt the Lord. It was a temptation that came upon Job that would, even as Satan suggested here, cause him to curse the name of the Lord. This was a test that Job was going through. If he lost everything, what would his response be? That was the test. Would he doubt the Lord? Would he stop fearing the Lord? Would he allow sin in his life? Would he curse the name of the Lord? Folks, that's the way it is with every temptation that comes upon us. It's not simply a temptation, but it's a test. And it takes place for our good. The Lord allows Satan, the powers of darkness, this sinful world, our sinful flesh, he allows all these different sources of temptation to bring temptation upon us from one time or another. But he does it for a purpose, to test us. Listen to James 1:12. Because here we find one of the great reasons why the Lord allows temptation to come upon us and upon his people. James 1:12, Blessed is the man that endureth temptation, for when he is tried, he shall receive the crown of life, which the Lord hath promised to them that love him. Temptation comes upon the Lord's people and upon men of the earth in general because it's an opportunity of service. It opens up an opportunity to be faithful and to receive eternal rewards. Think about it. The next time you're tempted, that's an opportunity to remain faithful to the Lord even in the midst of the temptation. The next time you're tempted is an opportunity to put the Lord first in your life, to set the proper example for others around you, and to reap eternal rewards for your faithfulness. That's one of the great reasons why the Lord allows temptation into our lives. It's an opportunity to serve the Lord and to be faithful to him. In Revelation 3:10, Because thou hast kept the word of my patience, I will also keep thee from the hour of temptation, which shall come upon all the world to try them that dwell upon the earth. Here's the other verse we looked at prior. Again, you can see how this is a testing that falls, in this case, upon all the world. But you notice when testing falls upon all the world, the Lord promises to keep thee from the hour of temptation. In other words, the Lord shows his faithfulness to his people during times of temptation. Look, when we face a temptation and we remain faithful in the midst of it, that's the Lord's faithfulness on display. That's the Lord's great power on display. That's the Lord enabling on display. He's the one enabling us to remain faithful during that time of temptation. So when a Christian remains faithful, it reveals a lot about the Lord. Stop and think about the very nature of testing. If you take a test at school, why do they give tests at school? Supposedly it's to reveal what we know about a subject. The Lord talks about our works being tried by fire when we stand before the Lord in judgment. And the idea is it's going to reveal which are the works God is pleased with, the gold, silver, and precious stones. And it's going to reveal the works that God isn't pleased with, the wood, the hay, and the stubble. Testing reveals things. When we face temptation, one of the great areas of truth that temptation is revealing is God's greatness, his grace, his love. Because again, if we remain faithful through that temptation, it speaks volumes about the Lord who is walking with us every day, step by step, getting us through that temptation. But you know what? When we face times of temptation, it's a testing as well, because it reveals a lot about us. I know many times in my life I've seen where when I started to feel self-confident and when I started to get a prideful attitude and I felt like, maybe I don't need the Lord as much as I think I do. Right about that time, a temptation would come along. I would fail the Lord miserably. And it would be a reminder to me of the true spiritual condition that I'm in. That without the Lord, I can do nothing. As fallen, sinful mankind, I can do nothing. I can't remain faithful to the Lord for 1 second without the Lord's constant intervention in my life. Temptation is a test that will reveal that about ourselves. Temptation will reveal our weak spots. There are some temptations that we're able to successfully go through by God's grace. There are other temptations that we miserably fail. Well, that's a weak spot. And many times the Lord allows a temptation in our life simply to show us where we're weak, so we can work at building up that area of our life. There are certain temptations that seemingly continually get the victory over God's people. One of the great lessons to be learned, if you're really struggling with the temptation and it seems like you just can't get the victory over it, one of the great lessons to learn is that's your weak spot. That means you need to do everything you can to avoid that temptation whenever possible. So by understanding what our weak spot is, we then can choose to avoid those areas that we know are weak, to avoid temptation that come our way. Like, for example, I'll just pull an example out there, like if we find that when we're with a certain friend or group of friends, they end up leading us, down into sinful activities during the times that we're with them. Maybe they like to go out and they like to get drunk, which we know is a sin. Maybe they go out and they like to, commit other acts, sinful acts when you're together with them. Well, once you understand that that's a weak spot, then you can come to understand the need to maybe avoid going out with those friends because that's where it's going to lead you. King Solomon talks about how it's in the Proverbs where he's tempted by a woman, by a harlot. And so what's he have to do? Avoid that street. Don't go down the street, young man. When he talks about a young man and their need to avoid it, don't even go down that street. Just avoid that temptation because that's a weak spot in your life that opens up an opportunity to sin that you've already seen your life is weak. That type of idea. When temptations come upon us, it's also a test that shows us our need of Christ, like I just mentioned. Folks, every time we go through a temptation, whether we fail or whether we are successful in that temptation, successful to withstand that temptation, we should always keep in the back of our minds how wonderful the Lord is and how much we need Him. When we fail, it reminds us of our need to run to Him, to ask for forgiveness, and to seek a closer relationship with the Lord. When we successfully go through a temptation, we need to stop and thank the Lord for His grace being with us to get through that temptation. Temptations reveal constantly to us our need for the Lord's presence in our life. So why would the Bible translate 4 words, the King James translators, when they translated the King James Version, why would they translate 4 different words, 2 Hebrew and 2 Greek, by the word temptation when the words actually mean a testing or a trial? Why would that happen? Well, it's because the Lord led them to do so. Because every temptation is truly a trial. That's why in the verses we read, in the 2 texts we read in, let me just give you once again the references. Our original 2 texts in James 1:12 and also in Revelation 3:10. That's why in those texts originally that we saw, The idea of a temptation coming upon men in the very next phrase is described as a trial or testing that comes upon man. It's because every temptation is a test that reveals something to us. Whether it's the Lord's greatness, whether it's our great need and the weak spots in our life, whether it's God's grace in being with us. There's many different reasons why temptations come into our lives, but please remember, every time it does, it's a test meant to reveal something to us. So the next time you're tempted, the next time you face a temptation, understand the Lord didn't bring it on you, but He certainly allowed it to take place. And He allowed it for a reason. He has something to teach us when we face that temptation. There's something to be learned. There's something He's going to reveal to us that will strengthen us as Christians and enable us to more faithfully serve Him in our day-to-day walk for Him. I do want to thank you so much for being with us. Thank you for joining me in this Bible study. May the Lord bless you as you study His Word.